I gotta stretch out first. Okay, I'm ready. Welcome to Tacos and Trends, the podcast powered by Made Trends, where we explore the intersection of culture, consumer behavior, and trends shaping tomorrow. Today, we're diving into the redefinition of luxury, but beyond materialism. In this episode, we're going to talk up to Khala Simmons, who has this idea that she's been vetting out: less greed, more gratitude. I love it. Thank you for joining us today. Just a little bit more about Khala. She is the founder of many things, most recently Fifth Origin Media Company. She's a media specialist and a founder, and she's really just worked in many different vias of the industry and is here to share some of her expertise. She's been a huge help to us already, and I think you should look out for all the big things she's doing. She also has her own podcast, Creative Gratification. Please make sure that you're following around. We'll include the link below. As always, if you like what you hear today, please subscribe, share, or visit our website for more insights. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited. I'm also nervous because, as I was telling you before, I feel like we're in your space. So tell me, maybe I feel like everyone always appreciates if you tell us a little bit about your media journey. And then I have a lot of detailed questions, which I think hit on topics people have top of mind. So just maybe give us a little bit of your journey.
Yeah, so I'm Khala. As she said, I am New York based, but I'm a Southern girl. I'm from South Carolina. I went to school for marketing and mass media. Initially, I thought I was going to work in fashion marketing, but then things kind of took a detour. My senior year of college, I launched a self-development blog called The Melanin Perspective. That kind of gave its way to the podcast space the next year. And that's where I launched my first podcast, the Bougie Bossa podcast, right before the big boom, in the pandemic. That's when everything started taking off there. And honestly, I just felt like I had something to say. There was no real deep reason for starting it. I just saw an opportunity and I started talking, and you can kind of hear that even going back to listen to it. And it kind of evolved into this thing, and it gave way to these other sort of avenues. And so in that time, I was an arts and culture editor at a newspaper. And then I somehow landed up in PR, and that's how I ended up in New York. I just had my 3-year New York anniversary Monday, actually. Yeah, so it's been some time, not that much, but for me, for sure. And so from there, kind of just dabbling all around. I can't really sit still when it comes to the media stuff. And I kind of was just able to leverage the podcast to pursue PR and then go into production, work in social, and, start dabbling in film and the documentary space. And somehow I landed here where I started a whole new brand, Fifth Origin. I'm on my second podcast, Creative Gratification now, and working on other projects. So yeah.
Amazing. Could you tell me what the difference is between the new podcast, the Creative Gratification? I know because I've done some research here and we've been talking about it. And just to be clear, are you still running your old podcast as well? Are they both going, or one's traded out for the other?
Yeah, so they both are their own thing. You can actually go and listen to both separately. The Bougie Bossa podcast, I intentionally decided to keep it up because even though I'm not in that same space anymore, there was still a lot of value in it. 65 episodes, 4 years worth of content. Yeah, I ran that for about 4 years, 4 seasons in 4 years. When I had the concept for Creative Gratification, I actually thought that I was going to be launching it under my last brand, Bougie Boss Media. So I thought I was going to be building out this Rolodex of I've got the first podcast, I've got the first documentary, and now I'm going to have the second show. And then I just felt led to I got this nudge where it's no, I think it's time to close this chapter. And that was around the end of last year. I actually started conceptualizing and developing Creative Gratification over a year ago, last January. It's been a long time in the making, and I thought it was going to be under that. And then it's no, you're going to start a whole new thing. So yeah, 2 different shows.
That's so interesting. And to basically a show is a brand as well. I think this is what we were talking about a little bit just right before we started as well. It feels I think we have going through a similar growing pain where we felt like we had our brand, it's established, but sometimes a brand only flexes so much, right? Because if you build a brand, it is only so flexible. And there's a place where even if it's the work is like authentic to you, it's
Right.
not like authentic to the brand and the audience there. So it feels like sometimes it almost like forces your hand to have to like start something separate. That's like what we're finding ourselves in the same place, which is exciting. But as we we're talking about as well, like a lot of work. And
No, yeah.
it's so much work because even though like you have the skills, you kind of still have to build. It's still the same building blocks, right? Even if it's like a different focus.
Yeah.
And I thought this interesting. And I think you talk about this and it's like a lot of like the ethos of what you do, right? A lot of it. And that's where you're going with like creative gratification, right? It's in this like fast paced world. You can't get everything done at once, even if it looks like other people are, right? And so I like how you talk about this. And I'd love to hear like more directly from you about this. Like you're about like trusting the process, right? And understanding it's a process. And it's a process as the brand's growing, like if I understand correctly as well, like you're also growing, right?
No, I feel like that's why I always like to say like business is so personal. I feel like the way that we all show up in business is directly impacted at like by who we are as an individual and like our personal life journeys, especially when you're like an entrepreneur or you're like leading a brand. It definitely is. And I find that everything that I end up covering, I have to go through it first, like trial by fire. And so it adds a different layer. And I feel like it is a hard thing because you get attached. And then it's like now I have to start all over again. Like people have come to know me for this thing. And now it's like I got to start something new. And it can feel like lost momentum, but you know, you're doing it for a greater good of, you know, as much as I love Bougie Boss Media and all that I did in that brand, in hindsight, it's like, I think the longevity that I'll have with Fifth Origin is just way more sustainable. And it just made more sense, like with the direction that I'm headed in to like expand a bit. So yeah.
No, definitely. I know like exactly what you mean. And I think that so I have a question for you. And I think it like plays back to like the last panel talk we had as well. This like where the brand like this is like very personal because I also feel the same way. Like it doesn't have my name on it like the same as you, right? But it's like so personally me and like lived in my head for so long and like been my livelihood. Do you feel like this personal feeling and attachment to brands and what you build is more like female characteristic than a male characteristic in the entrepreneurial space? Because for me, it feels like in the entrepreneurial space, there's like a lot of this with the women where it's like, you hear so many women who are like, oh, I birthed this brand.
Yeah.
Right? The analogy where I feel like I know a lot of like men entrepreneurs as well. And they're just like turn and burn, work didn't work. It doesn't feel like it has as much of like, at least in my circle, as much of their like DNA in it as I see in all of my female founders and all my female friends brands, where it feels like you can like remove the person and their like DNA is still all over the brand.
No, I agree. I think that's the same thing, but kind of like you use the birthing analogy. I think it's because like men don't really understand what birth is like, you know? And so I feel like it's hard to be attached to something that you don't fully understand. And so it's like we have something more direct that we can relate it to. We pour so much more into it. I think it's a lot easier sometimes for men to be more detached, for better or worse. And so, yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, and no, it's interesting, like the dynamic of that. No, I always think it's like just interesting. You can't like ignore the differences, right? Of like how a woman leads and how a man leads. Not that there isn't crossover. I feel like I'm going to get in trouble out there for this. So talking about that, about branding and obviously building businesses, there's also a piece about like business development and networking, which is what we've really been focusing on at Tacos and Trends. And I've fully disclosed many times my own personal discomfort with networking, just because I'm shy and I feel like every person who I've spoke to has like a different take on it. Full disclosure, we met at our last Tacos and Trend event in Brooklyn. And then when we spoke afterwards and connected afterwards, I thought it was so interesting when you told me you go to a lot of networking events, a lot of business events, and your goal is like to like connect with one person. That made it seem so less overwhelming. I think my type A personality is like, there's 200 people in the room. Like if I don't meet all 200, like I've failed. But for me, I was like, oh, like if I just had to go to an event and talk to one person, and connect with one person, like even I could do that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I feel like you said, it takes the pressure off. And there's something about that singular focus. So like if you go in with the intention of like, I'm going to connect with at least one person, it feels more doable. Like I can do that. Like even an introverted person, they can do that, especially if they're polite. And then like more often than not, you end up connecting with more than one person. And at that point, it's like, oh, well, this is more than what I even was wanting. And so it was more than a win, got more than what I even bargained for. And then the more you do it, like the more you can kind of open yourself up to like the practice of engaging with more people. And then if they're connecting with something, then they'll connect you. And it becomes this organic snowball effect kind of, but just being singularly focused, it really helps.
Yeah, no, I would like love this. So far the tips I've gotten is like go to the event by yourself without a wing woman and like just connect with one person. Like literally anyone can, to your point, anyone can do that. So speaking of events, I know you're plotting and planning your next New York event. Could you tell us a little bit about it and what to expect from the event?
Yeah, so as we've been talking about, we're currently in the midst of the first season of the new show, Creative Gratification. It's all about practicing less greed and more gratitude for creatives on our journey. And so the season we're already coming up on the third episode, so time is flying by. It's set to end in June, and I thought it'd be great to bring a bunch of creatives together at the end of the season to come and just like have a moment to express gratitude together and to kind of just reflect, kind of kick off the summer because it ends in June, the season. And you can expect cute looks, like of course, like always, I'm always doing the most when it comes to deep conversation. Like I can never be surface level, even if I wanted to be. So engaging thoughts, like connecting, genuine connections is really a big thing for me. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm excited about it.
Amazing. We'll make sure as soon as you drop the details, we'll make sure to share them with everyone here, and we'll make sure to join as well. I love it. So from our perspective as well, I'm talking about media. I can't help but ask the same question I ask everyone. Could you tell us 3 trends that you see like in your space, in the media space, that like people need to know?
Oh man, I think
Or like 3 that resonate with you like most.
Yeah, 3 trends. I would say long form media is making a huge comeback. I think for a while, like, everything was social first, like even with a lot of the longer form platforms, like implementing these like, the reels and the shorts and different things like that. So definitely like the podcasting having a big boom moment. And so shout out to you guys for getting ahead, because you believe it or not, you guys are still ahead. Like even with the big boom, it still is such a new like entity to the mainstream. And so that's something I'm seeing a lot. Blogs are making a big comeback. We can shout out Substack for that. Like that resurgence of the written art form. And so I think that that's like a really big one right now. Like I'm even playing around with starting my own Substack, and I had a blog like back in the day. And so, and you're even seeing a lot of like legacy journalists moving to Substack, which is very interesting.
Yeah. No, I think that's amazing. We also have like I've been blogging for a very long time. It's interesting though, when we also definitely see everyone shifting to Substack, but it's so crazy. It's a little bit what we were talking about before as well, is that like but it's like a new tool you have to learn, right? Like I feel like we had our like for like our WordPress blog, we have it like down, like bing bam boom, here's what we do. And then I feel like we were like, okay, let's like just like beta test like Substack and how it holds our content. And I was like myself like so clunky and like, oh, like slow. And I think it's like, to your point, I think why like your like creative gratification, I think also like resonates with me is because you have to remember like, oh, you actually need space to like create things. Like there's so much pressure, but you need space to learn like new tools, and you need space to like figure out like what your creative process is. But it's so hard. I feel like in a media space where media is moving so fast, and I think as well, also with like the fast pace of media, you like as a consumer, you see some things and you don't know how big the teams are behind the scene, right? I feel like there's so many people who it looks like they're an individual, and then you meet them in person and you're like, oh, you got a team,
a whole army behind them. Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, okay, like, like that makes, but I think you don't see that part. So I love what you're doing where you're like, okay, listen, like there's room to build brands, you need space, and also like if you slow down enough and see that you need that time, like you can appreciate it. It's like I think whenever you talk about, which I want to get into more, like redefining what luxury is as well, like the luxury to be able to like learn a new skill, right? It's scary because, you know, you like, it's uncomfortable. Like I was saying for myself, even it's like uncomfortable to do things that you're like, don't feel so confident in. But like
Yeah.
whenever you get to the other side of it, it's very, very like gratifying to be like, oh, like I learned something new. And whether you're like great at it or not, like it's about like the journey and what you
Yeah.
learned.
No, I would agree. I think that's something that I like am just now really like reaching a place where I can truly embrace it, which to be fair, it's like, I think a lot of people in creative spaces struggle with it, especially now. There's so much out there to compare yourself to, and there's always something new to hop on. It's so funny that you talk about like taking your time and not like being able to like kind of focus on one thing and being aware of the help that other people have. I have an episode coming up called Mediocre Multi-Hyphenates.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, where I'm like talking all about that, because I think it's great to like there's not a creative I know who isn't a multi-hyphenate. I think we all are, and like we're all multifaceted and have different dreams and things that we want to do. But like this notion of trying to do it all at the same time is just it really like kills the process, and then you kind of end up with like subpar work as a result, because you're stretching yourself so thin and you're not being like present or patient. And then when you look at the root of it, it's really like people just not knowing how to like having shiny object syndrome basically, and like wanting to not knowing how to be present and focus on like this one thing in front of them.
No, definitely. It's like just, I think it's like just being like, I think there's like a programming as well to be like goal oriented. I think when I've talked about this a lot with like friends and colleagues, is that I think as well, like when I kind of like launched Made Trends, my agency was in a moment where like it felt like it was this like, you know, like this boss moment for women, and it felt like, oh, if you were doing something and you had an idea, it meant you were like an immediate millionaire, you had immediate fame. But that was like that's actually such a small fraction of like the population, and underneath that there's like tons of people who are very successful, and it looks different. And I think understanding that like success could look a lot of different ways. And I think also, I love your idea of like redefining what luxury is. I think part of luxury, like if I think under that, and I'm interested to hear like more about what it means to you. Part of it is like just being able to like define your own success, right? Like is your success like, oh, you only work part-time so you can be with your kids? Is your success like becoming a multimillionaire and like selling your company? Like it could be any range, but the freedom to like define your own success does feel very luxurious.
No, I agree. And I think, you know, I can't quote the definition verbatim, but when you look up the definition of luxury, you don't really see like it's not centered around material items.
Yeah.
And I think that that's like an important factor to note, like to your point, like it's really about whatever you make it out to be. Like just like that whole concept of wealth is more than money. And it's about priorities. And it's like, obviously, you know, we need material items to survive in this world. But like when you're at the end of this world, your time in this world, that's not where you're focused on. And so it's like, you know, defining what that looks like for you, or how valuable our time is, you know, the other relationships we have in our life. And then this whole concept, I think we're on the brink of this renaissance of, I've been seeing a lot of content around defining your identity outside of what you do, which in Western culture is something that has been a focal point for forever. And so trying to like break out of that mode and define like, you know, what does happiness look like for me? Fulfillment look like for me? You know, and not even just in the aesthetic, like bubble bath sort of way, like that's cool. But you know what I mean? Like you said, being able to go out, like even I considered it like the fact that, you know, I now have this life where I was able to go to your event at noon on a Wednesday, you know, like that, like stuff like that, you know?
Yeah. Like that you can like, I feel like drive your own ship for me also feels like very interesting. And I think it's crazy. Like if you would have asked me like pre-COVID, even like what my identity was 100% work. And I was like so proud of that. I feel like as well. Like for me, that was the goal. But I think during COVID, there was a moment to slow down. I also had my son, which I think makes you like reevaluate things. But like I was like thought the North Star was like to be able to be identified by like your career path and how hard you worked. But then I was like, oh, I feel like there was the pause of COVID, and then this little tiny angel came into my life. And I was like, oh, wait, there's like more out there. And I was like, oh, who knew? And yeah, but then you realize like what like a tug and pull that is of like, I think whether it involves a child or doesn't involve a child, it's like very, at least for me, it's very difficult to be so like career focused and goal focused and like love that, but then also like force myself to like do other things as well. Because I was like, oh, I realized I was like, oh, interesting. Like prior to having like this little person who requires my time, like, oh, I was like super happy to work every weekend. I'd be like working on my stuff at night. Like when everyone else was like sleeping, I was like, now I can write. Now I can do this.
This is my
like
time.
all I was doing.
That's so crazy. No, I think it's like, even with my own, like, cause I don't have kids yet, but I think about like, I think a major difference with even building like my first brand, the Melanin Perspective versus Bougie Boss Media versus now with Fifth Origin. I think this is the first time where I'm building something where my identity isn't like focused around it, which is kind of ironic because the whole premise of Bougie Boss Media was redefining luxury beyond materialism and like really thinking beyond, but I was so like locked into it that I wasn't as present. And now like obviously as you get older, your priorities shift. And so it's been an interesting time of like kind of building something again, like with a fresh sort of outlook on life.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I guess it's like also part of like growth as well, right? That you're always like reevaluating. And that's also like a luxury to be like, oh, okay, I can reevaluate, redefine, because I think we know there's like definitely some people who aren't in a situation that like allows that like space and flexibility. So I think like being grateful for it and like appreciating it is really important. So I love it. I love what you're building and what you're doing. So I have to I have to also, because I like to be full disclosure. So you reached out because you were like, hey, if you need some help with your podcast, and you gave me some like quick tips, like 3 I'm thinking of specifically. Do you have any? And I thought it was like literally enlightening for me and the team. And so if anyone out there listening is like thinking to start a podcast and they're interested in this, like maybe even it resonates with them more, like I have to say, to kind of jump all over the place. Yeah. For myself, whenever we decided to start like seeing if there was something here for a podcast, it was because I realized that you actually have to have like a like media content. I don't even know if I'm using the right verbiage, but for me, if the options were have a podcast and talk to like colleagues and people I respect and learn things and like share information with people in that format felt much more comfortable than, for example, and I think I told you this, rather than filming like a get ready with me video, which would like never would in my whole world would like never happen. And so I was like, okay, of the lesser of the 2 evils, like I choose the podcast because it feels like it's a format where I can share. Yeah. And so if someone was like thinking to do a podcast, like top 3, like pro tips or like anything you have to say.
I would say, I mean, speaking to your point about having enough media content, make sure you have at least 20 topics, like episode topics. Because I think you'll see like, I mean, I can't remember the exact percentage off the top of my head, but there's a very, very small percentage of people who start podcasts that get past 10 episodes.
Interesting.
And so make sure you have like at least like 20 to 25 topics so that you can ensure like this thing has some longevity. Or it could be, you know, maybe it's positioned as more of a limited series sort of situation, which is fine, but you would want to know that before going into it, because you don't want to promote it as this new show and then it's like, actually it's giving 6-parter.
Okay.
So I would say that another thing is I would say do your research on like, there's so many platforms out there that you can use to like streamline, especially now that it's been made so mainstream. So, you know, hosting platforms like we were talking about to make your job easier. And I would say to like listen to different types of podcasts and different genres to get a feel for like what feels most aligned to you. And part of it, you'll figure it out as you go, but it's such a broad landscape and it can be as big or as little as you want to make it. And so sometimes it can be hard to make a decision. So it's like video or audio, like bi-weekly, weekly, monthly, do I want to have guests? Do I want it to just be a solo? Do I want it to be a mix? Like those are a lot of considerations that a lot of people don't think out beforehand, but kind of start listening like beyond the consumer ear to like think about, if you're in that role, what feels the most aligned for like your current scope.
I love that's really smart. That's really, really smart to like, yeah, because I feel like almost because it is like, I think it is like overwhelming because you're like, oh, I could do anything, right? So I think as well, like we were talking about before, almost if you have like a roadmap, right? Of like, okay, here's where I think I'm going. And like it feels like in creative spaces as well, a roadmap helps keep like a creative who could be anywhere, like on the road as well.
Oh yeah. I live and die by my roadmaps. Like, and it helps to like, like I said, like some stuff you're just going to have to do, like the clarity comes with action some of the time, but there's a lot of resources out there that you can be proactive in learning about, researching different, like popular mics and like, sometimes even on YouTube, like looking in the description of like, the video podcast. Sometimes they may put equipment in there, like, getting a feel for like show notes and like there's so many things that you can kind of just like take in. So
I love that. No, but I think that you said something that I think is a really good quote is like action is clarity, right? Because I'm like, I've never heard that quote before, but I love it. And I'm going to put it in my active vocabulary if you don't mind. It's because it's true. Like in my head sometimes, and even like in my notebook and in my Google notes and on my Notion and on everything, there's lots of stuff there, but it's true. Like sometimes until you just like do it, you're like, oh, okay, like I think it's great to go through that process and like have a roadmap. But I agree, like until you actually start, you're like, you don't know.
Yeah, you don't know.
You don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like that's why it's like, do as much research as you can, but it all depends on your type of creative style, because there's some creatives that do a lot of research heavy. Some are like, I'm just gonna like dive right in. And so, the process can be different depending on like what type of person you are. But yeah, don't let it hold you back, because sometimes you can like allow the research phase to be a crutch and be like procrastinate. So
yeah. So if you're a procrastinator, research, like we live in a research space. Literally with the team today, I was saying like there has to be like a finite space for the research. Otherwise we can always research, but like we're going to have to turn something out at the end. Like I love it. We all love to do research. It's very comfortable for me as well. It's like my vibe, but like at some point, like the line has to be drawn and like we have to do something with the research.
No, exactly. I had to like come in because I will do the most and I'll create like the pretty little, like you said, like the notions and be in Canva and just like having so much fun. And I've not done any like tactical action items.
Yeah, like you haven't like executed, like I was like saying, like at some point we have to like execute the work.
Yeah, like, okay, at some point, like set out a plan. And so for me, I found that I guess like this is a very specific, nuanced tactical tip, but like for me, what I did at the start of creative gratification, because I'm like, I actually didn't know that I was going to come out with it this year until the top of January. And so I was like, all right, I got it like 3 months. I got about 12 weeks. And so what I did was, because I know me and I know I can be a procrastinator and overplan, I sat down and I just hammered out a checklist, because usually like people like that who overplan also love like checking things off of lists. Yeah. And so I created a checklist of all the actual like action items, and I broke it up by like week and pre-production and production and all that, like all the things that I needed to do to get it done from development to promotion. And that doc was my holy grail. And I would get so much satisfaction each week of just like going in to check it off. And it kept me so accountable, and it made it digestible and less overwhelming.
I think that's so good. And I think with so many people also having like whatever their side hustle is, even if it's like outside of like podcasting, things like that, I think having a roadmap, like for me, I make a lot of those. I'm a checklist type of girl as well. But like I act like the checklist is my boss.
Oh yeah.
Because, like which is technically, but I have to be like, oh, okay, if my boss checked in on me, have I like, which might be like just say like how crazy my procrastination is, but I have to be like, oh, okay, did action items actually get done at like a reasonable like pace as well?
No, yeah. And I mean, and it's like, of course, life happens, like give yourself a little like realistic wiggle room, and you'll have to move a couple things around. But like, it really kept me on. And I would share like with my friend, they were like, how are you able to do so much? And I'm like, it's this checklist, like it's getting me together.
Amazing. Wait, so I heard whispers of a rumor from you before we started filming today. I hear something, there may be a workshop, or this list may become available to at the end of summer, September.
Yeah.
I heard a rumor you may be hosting a workshop, a workbook. Tell us more about what's cooking, maybe, just to entice the listeners.
Yes. So I am working on like this resource for anyone like wanting to create any sort of digital series, whether it's a podcast, YouTube, whatever, web show. It's going to be called Solo Series Pro. I actually do have a waitlist form for it, so I'll make sure that you have the link. But it's dropping in September. I'm really excited about it. Like literally, it'll have the checklist and like so many other things. I love creating like operations things to streamline, because I believe like even though it's not as sexy as like the art and creative, like it frees you up to do that. Especially when you have limited resources, which a lot of us often start with. So I'm excited.
I'm excited too. I'm very excited. Count us in. I have to thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time today. I feel like always a pleasure. I love our chats. We have to do it again.
This was so fun.
Yeah, definitely keep us in the loop with what you have with cooking. And I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye.